Well, hello. Can you guys hear me? Is this mic working okay? Good? All right. Has it started with the snow and the sleet and all that that's supposed to happen tonight? Is that what's going on outside? Really? Wow. It's one of the things I like best about Charlotte. I used to live here a long time ago. I think it's been about 10 years since I've lived here now. But that's how I got started with this group, was I lived here in town. And I remember, I think this might be the first presentation I'd ever done. They asked me, like on a Thursday afternoon at 5, my boss came to me and said, oh my gosh, someone has to go to this user group and do a presentation. I'm like, I've never done a presentation. I can't stand up in front of people. And I think they had like 75 people there. And it was in this beautiful stadium room. And I walked in and I just, blah, 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 I have no idea what I said. When I was done, I was just like, okay, did I say anything right? Did I do? And he's like, you were great. And I'm like, I was sweating bullets and I just had no idea what I was even talking about half the time. So that was like my first presentation ever. I love coming back to this group. Anytime I get to come back and present here, I really enjoy it. Well, I'm a setup and deployment MVP. So what I get to do is play around with the tools that will deploy Microsoft operating systems. And they haven't really changed the tools themselves from deploying Windows 7 to Windows 8 or 8.1. What's really changed there is the operating system and the way you would install things like applications from the application store. Those are some of your big changes. But as far as the tools go, what I'm going to talk to you tonight about are going to be the MDT Microsoft Deployment Toolkit 2013. I want to talk a little bit about the Security Compliance Manager. The reason I want to talk about that is because if you're not aware of the fact that you're deploying group policy packs using these tools, which you do by default, you could break things. So you might want to know what's going on under the hood so that you can either tell it, don't do that, I don't want you to do it, or you can customize it to do whatever you want it to do. And then my favorite thing, I love Orchestrator. Has anybody played with System Center Orchestrator in here? Let me see the hands. Oh, I can't believe I don't get to demo this. I totally blew up my machine today. So I'm up here trying to rebuild it. And you know, I mean, SQL just takes 2 minutes to install, right? If there's one product I hate, it is SQL. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but I hate SQL. It is just, every product requires it. It takes an hour and a half to install or to get your error message that it didn't install for some reason. I see all these heads nodding. It's like, yeah, I'm not the only one. So System Center Orchestrator runs on top of SQL, of course, just like all the other products. But I will tell you about it because it's phenomenal. And it's a real hot button right now with Microsoft. So there's lots of support out there for it. Dave already introduced me. I've decided to stop counting the years that I've been in IT. It's over 30 now. I started back in 1982 when I joined the Navy. Spent 7 years in the Navy working with computers, mainframes, punch cards. Anybody else? Punch cards? Yes. All right. Lots of you guys. Usually I'm in a room with a few hundred people. There'd be like 2 people that raised their hand for punch cards. We had punch tape hanging in the corner, but we didn't really do anything with it back then. So that was fun. And you guys are familiar with the MVP program, right? You know that we get to go out once a year, sometimes 2 and 3 times a year, and sit down with the product teams that create the tools we use. And we get to tell them what we like, what we don't like, what our clients like, what the clients don't like. So sometimes the product teams love to see us coming, and sometimes they love to see us going. It depends on how well their tools are responding to the client's needs out there. But that's going to happen here in the next couple of weeks. We're doing the MVP Summit the week before Thanksgiving. Also, desktop deployment product services. Are you guys familiar with DDPS engagements? I find that a lot of people are not familiar with this, and a lot of people already own the vouchers that will expire if you don't use them. And you can actually bring someone in for DDPS engagements. So I like to let people know what these are. You can bring someone in for 3 days, 5 days, 15 days, and say, show me everything there is to know about operating system deployments or Office 360. I think those are the only 2 that's actually happening right now. So what you do is, as an enterprise client, you would have some vouchers from Microsoft. Most companies don't even know that they purchased these with their enterprise agreement. So you guys would bring someone in who is DDPS certified, which of course I am, and then you would pay me with vouchers that you've already purchased, and then I take those vouchers and redeem them to Microsoft. So you don't pay me for anything. Microsoft ends up paying me for going into your environment, and I actually set up your whole lab. You've got System Center Configuration Manager running, your operating system deployments, zero touch. We can do user-driven interface. Anything you guys want to do based on the amount of time that you bring me in for. And I usually leave a book of documentation for every single thing we did. And I honestly think I'm the only person who does this. But I like to make sure that you guys have step-by-step instructions for everything we did in the lab so that when you go to production, you know why we had to set special DHCP features for your deployments. You don't have to run through, oh yeah, I remember we had this problem in the lab too. What did we do to fix that? And then you take 3-5 days to troubleshoot all over again. Where if you just had it in the documentation, you're like, oh, I remember that. Oop, right here, this is exactly what I need to do. Boom, done. You can move on to everything else that's broken. Another fun thing that I've gotten into, Configuration Manager migrations. Anybody running Config Manager 2007? Just a couple of you. About 4, 5, 6. Anybody thinking of going to 2012? That's actually what I've been doing lately, this last year. I did a lot of the DDPS engagements for Microsoft last year in 2012. 2013, I've been doing the Configuration Manager migrations. And I'm actually getting ready to go in the next few weeks. We're trying to figure out the start date and do Nestle. So that's going to be kind of an interesting one to get to go play with. So it's a worldwide, multi-billion-dollar organization to go in and play with their config manager and migrate from 2007 to 2012. But if you've taken a look at any of the docs that are out on that, they make it look like, oh, it's a piece of cake. You just run this little migration utility, everything comes across, no muss, no fuss. I'm telling you, it does not work that way. You run into all these weird issues, and it's based on how things were put together in the 2007 environment. Now, who's got your documentation right there beside you? You may have documentation for your 2000. Is the same person still there that installed 2007 and set everything up? Probably not. So you're sitting there blindly migrating objects, and when they don't come across, you have to figure out what this person did a year, 2, 3 years ago when they installed the product. So it's really, it can be a minefield. It really is. But I think it's lots of fun. I also do training, consultant, contract work, and you've got my contact information up there as well. All right, the first topic here, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, good old MDT. Guys, this is free. This is a free download from Microsoft. And it's kind of funny because a few years ago when we went out to the summit, Microsoft has the Windows Automated Installation Kit, the AIK, MDT. All these tools are free. All they wanted you to do was please migrate to Windows 7. No one's using their tools. No one was migrating. And Microsoft asked the MVPs, they're like, we don't understand. The tools are free. Everything's documented. Why aren't people migrating? And we said, because you make it too hard. Most of these tools are command line utilities, and every single one of them has a different syntax. It drives you nuts trying to figure out how to make one little teeny tiny thing like a profile work. And that's not so small when you multiply that by 50,000 machines that you have to have a default profile on. So it was really interesting to be able to sit down with them and say, don't you guys get this? These people that are doing the operating system deployments, they're not full-time OSD people. And the team actually argued with us. We're like, well, they should be. I'm like, organizations don't do that. These people are keeping Active Directory up, Exchange, SQL, everything. They're not just there to do operating system deployments. So they've gotten rid of a lot of the old tools, all the old command line syntax. We don't use those at all anymore. In fact, ImageX, a thing of the past, everything now is DISM. We don't use PEIMG, International Configuration Manager. Don't use that. Package Manager, thank you. We don't have to use that anymore. That was a nightmare to use. So MDT, what's nice about this, it's a graphical tool. And it's very simple to put your entire deployment together. And you can deploy Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1. Right now you can still do XP if you want to. I wouldn't recommend wasting time getting it in there because it takes a lot of time to get XP to deploy properly. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. Where, imagine, Windows 7, 8, and 8.1 is a piece of cake. So the first thing I wanted to show you are the basics for what MDT can do for you. And the version that I'm showing you is MDT 2013. This shipped probably about 3 weeks ago. So what I have here is, pretend that says MDT 2013 instead of 2012 Update 1. The last time I did this presentation was in Vegas just a few weeks ago for Connections. And they were telling us that we weren't allowed to talk about 2013 yet because it was going to ship during the conference. So we weren't allowed to talk about it. So I still had to do everything 2012 Update 1. what we have on our 2012 Update 1 machine is we have an MDT WinPE. Is everybody familiar with the Windows pre-installation environment now? Yep, most of you? Anybody not, and you're curious about what it is? Anybody? Really easy. It's a stripped down version of Windows 7 or Windows 8. They have just ripped great big huge chunks out of it. The purpose of a WinPE is to get the machine booted, connected to the network. That is it. So there are lots of things that aren't there, like, let's see, the server service isn't there. So you cannot map a drive to a machine running WinPE. But the workstation service is there, so you can map a drive from the WinPE to another machine in order to do a deployment. So there's a lot of things that have been ripped out of it. So we put our MDT WinPE on the deployment server itself. You can do network boots if you'd like to. And if you want to do a network boot, a Pixie boot, you would have to integrate WDS into MDT, which is really, really difficult. The way you do that is you take this WinPE and you copy it into WDS, and you're done. It takes all of 2 seconds. Now you can go out to your client machines, Pixie boot F12, have them connect to the WDS server, you choose your MDT WinPE, and everything runs. So when I say you have to integrate it, it's really simple to do. Or you could put that WinPE on a USB stick or a CD. They're pretty small, so you don't need to go all the way to a DVD. Take that out to your target machine, boot him up. He'll connect to the MDT's deployment share, download an image, and these images take between like 12 and 18 minutes to deploy. Now I say 12 to 18 minutes to deploy, but it depends on how you've set up that image to be deployed. Are you using a fat image that has all your applications in it? Or are you using just an operating system image and then telling it, well, I've got these 75 applications that need to install after the operating system is installed? Because that's going to take a little longer than if all your applications are actually inside your WIM image. That's a much faster deployment. But it also takes a little bit more time to manage your images, and you will end up with more than one image. So what we've really gone to is kind of a hybrid image type, where you can have an image that has applications that every single user is going to get, Office, Adobe Reader, that kind of stuff. And then you might have a task sequence, which I'm going to show you in just a second, that says deploy that image to all the machines. But then when you run it on some machines, I'm going to run a different task sequence that also deploys the applications for HR. I might have another task sequence that deploys additional applications for the sales department. But everybody gets that one WIM image. So that way you can maintain one image. You don't have to worry about hardware anymore. We haven't had to worry about that for a long time. So that's a nice way to have one image that can be deployed to lots of machines, but based on your task sequence, deploy additional items as well. Does anybody have machines that don't come into the network every single day? Everybody does, right? MDT, the free tool, has this really cool feature where you can put the entire image, all applications, drivers, operating system, everything needed on a DVD if it'll fit. You can go to 2 DVDs if you need to, or you could put it on a USB stick. No network connectivity needed. Of course, there are pros and cons. The pro, no network connectivity needed. In fact, if you want it to be a domain joined machine, there are some utilities out there where you could have it join the domain, but that makes that USB stick specific to one computer. So for large rollouts, it gets too crazy to think that this USB stick has to go to that computer, because you have to set up the blobs, everything has to be set correctly, and it's not easy to do. Quite cumbersome. What I don't like about the media feature with MDT, there's no version control. We've all got somebody who's very helpful in our offices, right? So whenever Susie's machine goes down, Joe over here, or Jan, I don't want to stereotype, has got an old USB stick from when they actually deployed their machine. Everything's on that USB stick. Now, they got it 18 months ago. So they're going to help. come over to Sue's machine and plug it in, boot it up, and install that old 18-month-old image. Hasn't been patched. What about your virus scanning signatures? There's all kinds of things that you might not want to roll all the way back on that USB stick. So no version control and no password protection. I do a lot of work for federal agencies. I live in D.C. now. So I help them do a lot of operating system deployments, Department of Labor, Transportation, OSHA, Medicare, Medicaid. They have some applications that are sensitive without even having any data in it. Just the fact that they gather this information could give a hacker a reason to hack into their systems to get the information and to know what the application is and how the application is configured. So you could get sensitive information off that USB stick even if there's no real data in it. There's a lot hackers can still do with that. The reason I bring these two things up is because with Configuration Manager, you can password protect this, and you can also expire it. So you can say this is only good for 6 months when you create the USB stick, and then in 6 months the certificate is revoked, and you can no longer boot the USB. In fact, if I want to, I could kill that USB stick at any time using Config Manager. So it's a little bit better, but Configuration Manager is not free. That's why you don't get all the bells and whistles with MDT. Branch offices. If you have some branch offices that might not have a full IT staff there, this is a fantastic feature. It's called linked deployment shares. And let's say in my Washington, D.C. office, I've got my MDT's deployment share. On it, I have operating systems, applications, drivers, task sequences that run to actually perform the deployments. Down in my London office, I have a server down there. So I might want to have an operating system. I might want to have Server 2012 go down as well as Windows 8, 8.1, so that I can re-image that server if I need to. So I could have a different set of objects from MDT that come from the DC office to London as I do going to the New York office. Because look at New York, there's no server. So which machine would I actually put this deployment share on? It doesn't matter. It could be an XP machine. All it is a shared folder, and the users locally automatically connect to the shared folder on the local machine and will perform the deployments locally. But you as the administrator have complete control over how the deployments work up in the Washington, D.C. office. You're the one creating the task sequences. Everybody else only gets read access to the objects where you have full control. So linked deployment shares, pretty sweet. They work really well. And if it gets too big, you can always seed it. You can always send them a DVD, an external hard drive or whatever, and say, hey, copy this onto the server, put it in this folder. And now from this point forward, you can keep it updated.
Now, is that managed, that share created by in the UI? And is it an SMB copy or is it bits?
So the first question is the share on the local machine created from within the UI? No, you have to manually do it. So someone has to go to that machine remotely or whatever.
And you're copying.
Yeah, create it. And then the second question was, is it an SMB, robocopy? It's however you want to do it. What I like to do, I like to cheat. I like PowerShell because it's so easy I can use it and I don't have to know anything about it. I like that. I have enough to do in my day than go out and learn a bunch of scripting languages. So everything that's done in MDT is done with PowerShell commands. And as soon as I tell it, replicate this linked deployment share down to the server in London, when it's finished, I can say, view the output button. I can look at that, and there's the exact line that ran, the PowerShell line that ran to copy it. And then I go create just a basic task. Go into scheduled tasks, create your own basic task, plug in that PowerShell script. All you have to do is copy the line, put it into a WordPad, give it a PS1 extension, and then you've got a PowerShell script. It's that simple. And then whenever you want it to run, you can just right-click and tell it to run once, or you can set it to run every Saturday at 2 a.m. So it's however you decide to set that up. The Mdt Database feature. This might seem like a lot of work up front, but I'm telling you it's so worth it. When's the last time you spent 5 days troubleshooting a server? You just re-image the thing, move on, because you've got 400 other things on your to-do list, I'm sure. So one of the nice things with the database is we can even use SQL Express. It doesn't have to be a full-blown version of SQL out there. I could have one server, this guy's running 2012. I could boot it up using the MDT WinPE. When it talks to the MDT server itself, he always sends over information like this is my MAC address, this is my globally unique identifier, this is my universally unique identifier. That information always comes across. And then based on how I have it configured in the MDT database, it can give that server the exact same IP address, subnet mask, set up the whole TCP stack any way I want it, give it the exact same computer name it had before, and this guy needs DHCP. So in the database, I say install DHCP. Oh, by the way, here's your scope. Here are your options. Every single time you re-image that machine, it gets the exact same settings every single time. So you set it up one time, and realistically, it takes about 15 minutes a machine. It's not difficult to do. And then every time you re-image it, boom, you don't have to worry about anything. Down here, server 3, running 2012 R2, talks to the MDT server, tells him his MAC address, and he goes, oh, you're supposed to be a domain controller. By the way, I want you to go replicate with this specific DC for the first time. After that, figure out who you want to replicate with. And I'm going to put DNS on you. We'll make it Active Directory integrated, and you can set up your scavenging. There's hundreds of settings in the MDT database, hundreds for each one of the servers. And then this is where it gets a little bit fun. All the tools. The Windows Automated Installation Kit. Or has anybody heard about the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit now? You guys been hearing a little bit about ADK? That's why I think it's important to talk about these at this time, because based on which tools you install will determine what operating systems you will deploy successfully. The tools that are inside, both AIK and ADK, are things like the version of the Windows pre-installation environment, or WinPE. The reason you might care is WinPE 4.0 is the first WinPE that has .NET Framework in it. You might have applications that you want to inject into that WinPE that require .NET, and you can't figure out when you install Windows AIK why you can't get .NET Framework tools to work. Well, there's no .NET there. So you have to go to at least WinPE 4.0. User State Migration Tool, USMT. This is the guy that allows you to gather users' data and settings from a machine, put them on a server someplace, wipe that box clean, put down a new OS, and then bring those back down. Or you can also do hard links, where you just say, okay, I want the data to stay there locally. Don't move, stay exactly where you are. A little map gets built of the sectors where the data currently resides. You can't format the drive, but all files around it will get deleted, and then the new OS gets laid down, and then everything's fine. The data doesn't have to go anywhere. I don't really like that feature. I like to format in between operating systems. How often do you get to go back to just, boom, level the whole playing ground and start from scratch, put the OS on? I think you end up with a lot less intermittent issues. So I like to format in between. Not everybody does. But different versions of USMT support running scan state. Scan state's the command line utility that gathers users' data and can put it on the server for you. And load state is what you would run, of course, to grab it back from the server and load it back onto the client machine. So scan state and load state, different versions that deploy different operating systems, which I'll talk more on that in a second. Good old ImageX. ImageX has been around a long time. We don't really have to use it at all anymore. ImageX has been completely replaced by DISM, the Deployment Image Servicing and Management Utility. DISM can now capture images and apply images. In the past, all you could do is mount an image, and copy files into it, inject drivers, inject applications into it, unmount it, or even patch it. It was nice to be able to patch a WIM image offline. Who remembers the old days when if you want to patch an image, you had to blast out the image, get it up and running on a machine, patch that box, and then create yet another image. So you end up with like 25 images, and you're, oh, which one, what's got the best, latest patches? And it ends up taking a week sometimes because patches blow things up, and you're like, well, can't create an image out of that. Or you go to create an image, and the image doesn't get created properly because they're gigantic. It's not abnormal to see images today that are 8, 10, 12 gigs in size. I see that quite often. Windows SIM, the Windows System Image Manager. I think this is the most hated tool on earth. I'm not sure why. It is a little difficult to understand, and there really is not good documentation for it. But this is the tool that you use to create your automated, unattended XML files that can run your deployments. Now, one of the coolest things about MDT is it uses all these tools under the hood. You don't have to know anything about any of these tools to use MDT. But I could also deploy any operating system I want to using just these tools, and I don't have to touch MDT. A word to the wise, though, if you don't understand these tools, it makes troubleshooting MDT very difficult because you're not sure where something failed. And if you know these tools and you know how they work, if something does fail with MDT, you can say, forget it, I don't have time to fix MDT. I'm just going to go out to the command line, hammer this out. 15 minutes later, your deployments are running, instead of trying to figure out what in the GUI broke. Windows AIK for Windows 7. These are your operating systems that are supported. Notice the very first one, XP SP2, still up there. Still supported to be deployed using AIK. Vista, Windows 7, 2003 Server, 2008, Windows Embedded for point-of-sales machines, and your thin PC, if you have clients that just need to connect to a terminal services farm or a Citrix farm. The reason they wanted to add those last two is because they wanted this product, MDT, to be able to deploy all the enterprise OSs. With the addition of these two, all enterprise OSs are covered now. The version of WinPE that is supported, WinPE 3.0 or 3.1, depending on which Windows AIK you get. I love this. I love when they do things like this. So there's two versions called Windows AIK for Windows 7, but they have different build numbers. So you have to go look at the build number to see which version of the tools you're actually getting, because they named them the same thing. They just didn't change the name. We still have Windows SIM, USMT 4.0. This is when the new hard link features were made available to us. And also volume shadow copy support. In the past, we had some problems with files that were locked. Think about Outlook. Outlook loves to auto-launch things for you, so it thinks you're going to do something with something, so it will automatically launch it for you. Well, that might be a file that needs to be saved in your settings. And USMT in the past would break because it was locked by Outlook, so it couldn't access it. So they took advantage of volume shadow copy, which we don't have to worry about locked files any longer. ImageX, in the old version, that's the only thing that can capture and apply your images. And DISM, notice that I did put in the whole version number for you there. The teams are changing all the version numbers. Some of the teams have started naming the version numbers 6.2 because Windows 8.1 is actually operating system 6.2, right? Windows 8.0 is 6.1. Windows 7 is 6. Vista is 6.0. Let me go the opposite direction. Vista is 6.0. Windows 7 would be 6.1. And then 8 is 6.2. The nice thing that DISM did, though, it replaced a lot of these little command line utilities, PEIMG, Package Manager, and International Configuration if you needed to have multiple keyboard supports. So it's kind of nice that we don't have to know the command lines and all the different syntax for those utilities now. They rolled them into DISM. Has anyone used DISM? Nobody? The commands are like this long. It's like typing a book every single time you type it. And there's no autocomplete. It drives you nuts. You're like, how come there's no autocomplete? But there's not. And they also put these weird little dashes in the strangest places. So you're constantly going, where's that dash? You know, there's supposed to be a dash in here, but is it mount dash whim or mounted dash whim dash? They're crazy. If you do start using DISM, I suggest that you build a little cheat sheet. So every time you type out a command, go to the help file for that command. And I'll show you when I do the first demo. And pipe it to a text file. You'll find that every time you run DISM commands, you run the exact same ones over and over again. You're going to mount a WIM image. You're going to do something. Maybe dump your drivers out of it. Maybe inject a few drivers into it. And then you're going to unmount the WIM image. And instead of having to go back and look at the help file and type these huge things every time, I just pipe them out to a text file, make a little cheat sheet, so that every time I go in and need to do something to a WIM image, copy, paste, run, done. Copy, paste, run, done. Same thing every time. Next is the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit for Windows 8. This has some pretty cool tools in it. Has anyone looked at ADK? You did today. What did you think?
I was very confused by it. It was a very high overview and training session that I was doing on Microsoft Academy, Virtual Academy.
It's like a suite of tools that have been put together now.
Yeah. And unless you download it actually to play with, you can't get anything out of their training module.
Aw. So you could get mine from Pluralsight. I don't know if you guys, are you familiar with TrainSignal? TrainSignal's been a company that I've worked with for the last 5, 6, 7 years. I love working with TrainSignal. They are a phenomenal company. They bend over backwards for their authors. They're just one of the best companies I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Well, they've recently been purchased by Pluralsight. Pluralsight is a development house for training. So most of what TrainSignal did was IT pro stuff. How to install Config Manager, how to get OSDs up and running. And so I've done all kinds of work for TrainSignal. Well, now that's all under the umbrella of Pluralsight. So if you need to go look up some good stuff on ADK, I've got tons of stuff out there to go take a peek at. So the supported operating systems for ADK is going to be Windows 7, 2008, SP2R2, Windows 8, and all the latest and greatest. So you see a big difference already, right? No XP. Yes?
Is AIK and ADK downloadable at TechNet, or do you get that as a purchase?
They're free for everyone. AIK and ADK are free for everyone. Free downloads from MSDN or TechNet. Have they taken MSDN down yet? I know they keep saying they're going to take one of them down. TechNet's going down? Okay. Next year. Okay. If you've ever downloaded AIK, it's really, really big. So you're very surprised when ADK comes over like that because you didn't really download anything. All you did was just download like the ADK setup program. You didn't get any of the tools. So when you install ADK for the first time, that's when you'll have to have internet connectivity so that you can download the tools during installation, or you can always tell it, I don't really want to do the installation, just go ahead and download all the tools to this folder. I don't like for my VMs to ever be on the internet. Never, 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 because I don't patch them. I blow them away, I break them all the time, rebuild them. So there's no reason to have WSS up and running for my environment. I have no idea where I was going with that. So back to ADK. You get WinPE 4.0, .NET Framework in there, PowerShell 3.0 support, Internet SCSI. There's a new option, and I love this. In the past, scripts would start running before the TCP stack was actually uploaded completely. So now they're making the product wait until the TCP/IP stack is fully loaded. Okay, now let's run some scripts that may or may not call things from across the network. So that's what they've done with the newest version, the WPE util wait for network, and make WinPE media.cmd. If you'd like to make your own WinPE, It's really very simple. I'm not sure if I put that in here. No, I don't think I did. In the past, to make your own WinPE, there's a utility called Copy PE. It comes in the AIK or the ADK. Go out to an administrative command prompt, copy PE space, tell if you want to do an x64 or an x86 architecture. All right, I'll break this one too. See how many mics we can break in one night. Back to the WinPE media, it makes it very simple to create your own WinPEs. You don't have to go through 15 different command lines anymore. It's just one command. But you do need to be careful if you tell it to create a WinPE on a USB, because it doesn't say, are you sure you want to do that? Because I'm going to format that USB. It doesn't tell you that, just formats the USB. So be sure that you don't care what's on that. Good old DISM. DISM is the utility that lets you manage your WIM and VHD images. You can mount them into an empty folder, and you can inject drivers, you can inject applications, unmount and save, and deploy. It makes your life so much easier. You can even patch them fully offline now, and it's very, very fast. USMT 5.0. Nice thing with USMT 5.0 is we have better log files. If anyone has used USMT in the past and it tells you that 16,000 files were found, it's not helpful. It doesn't tell you how many were copied, where'd they go. One thing I want to caution you about is DFS namespaces and USMT shares. If you do put a USMT share on a DFS namespace, turn off referrals if you have multiple sites. I actually did a deployment for a huge international company in London. And what was happening was we would save the data with USMT. They didn't tell me that they had set it up on a DFS namespace. So the servers were busy. You get to the 15th machine you're kicking off, they're busy doing other things. So stuff was going to Hong Kong. It was going all over the place. And when we ran load state, try to load it back on from the local machine didn't have anything for that machine. So I'm talking about some really interesting 3 a.m. conversations. We're all like, what happened to the data? Where did it go? So be careful with that. Volume Activation Management Tool, VAMPed. Guys, this is one of the coolest tools I've ever seen, and no one's ever heard of it. How many enterprise clients are here? I'd say there's about 10, 15. How many of you use KMS internally? Same number of hands. VAMPed is a free GUI. All you do is launch it. It's not even an application. You just launch one file, and it will show you what your KMS activations are currently set to. How many machines are within the grace period? How many are about to be outside of the grace period? How many are Mac clients instead of KMS? I've had some clients that accidentally loaded MSDN bits instead of volume license bits for their operating systems, and everybody's using Mac keys. They thought they were using KMS. We loaded up VAMPed, and I said, guys, what's going on here? Everything's Mac. They're like, oh, it can't be. We looked at it. No, it was. So VAMPed is a wonderful tool, very easy to use. It comes in AIK or ADK. Here's your bottom line. If you want to deploy Windows 7, use AIK. If you want to deploy Windows 8, use ADK. That's really the bottom line between those two utilities. You get a lot more with ADK. Like I said, it's a suite of tools. You get the Application Compatibility Toolkit, good old ACT. ACT helps you with shims. If you have applications that don't run properly on Windows 7 or Windows 8, maybe user account control is getting in your way, there are hundreds, I've never counted them, there might be a couple thousand shims built into ACT that can tell an application little things, or little lies is what they are. You launch an application, it says, hey, I need to run this as an administrator. I need to answer yes to UAC. And it says, oh, okay, yeah, I'm running as administrator. That's what your shim will do for you, even though it's not. So look at ACT if you're having to look at software development, especially for your in-house applications. Use the shims that Microsoft already has out there. They're well tested. Performance Toolkit and the assessment services. This is one of my favorite new tools. These guys together let you take measurements on your machines. So I could, let's say I have a machine that's having a problem coming back from hibernation. I don't know what it's doing. The log files aren't telling me anything. I need to see what is going on with this thing. So I can launch the Performance Toolkit and tell it, go into hibernation and resume, and it creates a log file of every single thing that's done. Go into standby, resume, shut down, boot up, check the power settings to see how green the machine is. And you don't have to be an expert. If you don't know anything about how to read these files, all you need to do is go to a machine that's working, do the exact same thing on a good machine, and then pull up both of the graphs, the charts, and compare them. And you're like, well, this machine's taken 45 minutes to load group policies. What's up with that? So you know you've got a group policy issue here. You don't have to be an expert. Don't let the tools scare you and think, oh, I've got to go learn everything I can about the tools before I start using them. And because most of these tools require SQL, you also get SQL Server 2012 Express with the 80K. You're going to have to go get it anyway, so it's nice they give it to us. Remote control and monitoring. At the break, I noticed I'm on slide 14 of 41. So I'm going to bump it up just a little bit there. The bottom line on remote control, if you have DART, the Diagnostics and Recovery Toolkit, you can integrate that into MDT or Configuration Manager. So when your clients are booted into a WinPE, maybe they're running scan state from USMT to save the user's data, or one of 400 other things they do before they actually install an operating system, you can remotely control that machine in a WinPE session. So DART comes with MDOP. Don't go try to find it by itself. It's a piece of MDOP. Most enterprise clients already have access to that, and it's very well documented as to how to integrate that into MDT and Config Manager now. And these are the step-by-steps. I'm not going to go through step-by-steps on those. But I want to talk a little bit about group policy packs. Group policy packs came out with Windows 7 and MDT. Nobody knew that under the hood, when you deploy a Windows 7 machine, you are also deploying group policies. These are group policies from DoD. They're pretty well locked down. If you have some old SANS devices out there that have to do NTLM authentication, these group policy packs will break that. So there's a lot of really cool, fun tools like the Security Compliance Manager that allows you to open up these GPO packs and look at these to see exactly what's set and change it. Save it and customize your GPO packs to be whatever you want. You can always go into MDT and tell it, don't apply GPO packs at all until you have time to figure out what they're doing. Has anyone looked at the Security Compliance Manager yet? This is a fantastic tool. I really wanted to demo it for you tonight. But it requires SQL. And guess what product I couldn't install? Drove me nuts today. But the nice thing about SCM is it's a utility. Yes, you do have to have SQL. But then you download all of these group policy settings from Microsoft, all these baselines. And I don't know if any of you are in the situation where you can't get your group policy people to give you the documentation to tell you what group policies are physically set in your environment, but yet you're supposed to be rolling out operating system machines. So what you can do is bring up a machine, join it to the domain, so you get all your domain policies, load SCM up on that machine, and tell it to dump, export your group policy settings. Boom, takes all of 30 seconds. You end up with group policies, and you can just scroll right through and see exactly what's set. So if you do have problems trying to get that information from one of your teams, you don't have to get it from the team anymore. In fact, you could even create GPO packs out of that. It's that simple to dump the settings from a local machine and say, okay, that's the group policy pack that I want to deploy. That's customizing our GPO packs. SCM, again, free tool. Free download from Microsoft. And one of my favorite things that it can do, it can load up a group policy, a whole set of group policies, and then spit them out into an Excel spreadsheet. Depending on how many policies are there, it might take all of 30 seconds, 45 seconds, but it's fantastic for documentation. Tell your boss you worked on it all weekend long. You typed this whole thing up. New disk support type. Is anybody getting UEFI machines now? So the bottom line for MDT is if it knows the machine is UEFI capable, it will automatically create the partitions that are needed. And of course, the whole reason that we're doing UEFI now, one of the reasons, other than security, is because you can get a lot more space. If you notice here with the good old MBR, the master boot records, we can have 4 primary partitions, or you could have 3 primaries, have 1 extended, and then chunk that up into logicals. With with GPTs, we can have up to 9.4 zettabytes in a single partition. So the whole thing is about larger hard drives. Plus, UEFI does have some security issues that come along with it. Really some security resolutions for us. And instead of just 4 partitions, you can have up to 128. Now, that is a limit that Microsoft put in there. UEFI, by default, has no limitations. It's just UEFI on Microsoft operating systems has that limitation. You'll get 4 different types of partitions now. So MDT realizes this machine is UEFI capable. It's going to set the disk type to GPT, the GUID partition table instead of MBR. And you guys know that this is not something that can be changed unless you remove all data and then switch it, format it again, and then put things back. So you don't want to start with MBR and then decide you're going to switch it to GPT later on. Start from the one you want to use. You get a FAT32 boot, NTFS for the operating system, WinRE, and an MSR partition. And I think this is my favorite tool. I love Orchestrator. And I know not many of you have seen Orchestrator yet, but it is phenomenal for automating all your processes. And it's like playing a game, putting these runbooks together. You just simply drag and drop pieces together, and then you draw a line from one to the other. And let's say you want something to report successfully in an email, then you could set it up for, I want a computer object to move in Active Directory. So you set it up to move a computer object from this container to another container. If that succeeds, send an email to me. If it doesn't, send an email to John, because John has to go check it and make sure that it gets moved somehow. But the really cool thing is it's not just about Active Directory. There are all kinds of integration packs you can get for Orchestrator. So instead of learning PowerShell if you don't have time, instead of learning VB script or the specific commands for the product that you're using, and I'm talking HP OpenView, there's all different integration packs. You can just create these nice little fun runbooks that do billions and billions of things. In fact, you don't even have to create them. You can download them already done. There's tons of companies out there that already have them created for you. So you can download them, plug in your domain name wherever you need to, and set it up to run the way you want it to run, and you're done. It's really very easy to get started with runbooks. But again, it's a huge product. I was really amazed because I've just looked at it from operating system deployment perspectives. But it really, you could create Exchange mailboxes during your deployment. You could move mailboxes. Pretty much the sky's the limit for anything you want to do. If you're familiar with Opalus, has anybody heard of Opalus? That's what this used to be. So Microsoft purchased it from another company. It was named Opalus, and then they've kind of plugged it into the System Center suite now. And I do love its acronym, SCORCH. It's kind of cute. The runbook integration with MDT, you can actually, let me show you what MDT looks like, since I don't think I've shown you that yet. There is a tool called the Deployment Workbench, and this is it. This is what MDT's Deployment Workbench looks like. You can come in, you can right-click and tell it to import an operating system. It could be a custom WIM image you've created, or grab one, the install WIM, off of a DVD or ISO from Microsoft. Import any drivers that you need to. Operating system, Office patches. And then, if you guys notice up here in operating systems, I have Windows 7 and Windows 8 as operating systems. So when a client gets a deployment, which one are they supposed to install? That's all configured in your task sequence. So the task sequence is where you can tell it to grab a specific operating system, specific applications. Let's see what we're doing in here. We're telling it to install. This one's installing Windows 8. And normally, in most environments, these are very, very involved. You have lots of applications. You have lots of driver packages that you have configured. So you might have 150 different sets of settings in here. I mean, they get very, very customized. You know, one of my favorite things is how easy they are to make big changes to. This deploys Windows 8. Let's say I had 75 applications in here that were being deployed, and they have to be deployed in a specific order, or they don't work properly. So I figured all that out. I don't want to mess around and create another task sequence. I could just come in here and tell it to browse, deploy Windows 8.1, and I'm done. That's what's so fantastic about MDT. It's compartmentalized. So it's like this big puzzle, and you can take a great big piece and take that piece out, put another piece in its place, like an operating system, fits perfectly, and you're ready to go. Your job is done. Yes?
When you're adding applications, is it an executable or an ISO file?
When you're adding an application, it can be an executable, it can be an MSI, it can be a VB script, it can be a CMD, it can be a BAT file. I don't care what you add, anything you want.
Where do you get to set the options?
Set the options.
Yeah, for a lot of applications, you got to choose the language, you got to choose the drive, files, and you can't just automatically install it. You're going to get a bunch of defaults.
No, and I always forget the name of the, Bob Kelly, a good friend of mine, sold his company. I think he sold it to Dell. It used to be IT Ninja. Does anybody know what the name of it is now? If you still Google IT Ninja, you'll go right to it. But it gives you the syntax for all the application installations. So every single application has a different syntax for installation. The rules for applications in MDT, you cannot allow the application itself to restart the deployment. MDT goes belly up, doesn't know how to come back from that. But let's say I have an application here that I've added, just a little trace32 log file. If I want a reboot to happen, I tell MDT after it's done installing the application, MDT reboot the machine. So you have to tell whatever your switches are, this guy he's just an easy trace32. Maybe it would be a silent or quiet. Or I actually did one time find a switch, I'm not kidding. It was very, very, very quiet. You had to have 3 varies in there for it to run silently. That's the other thing that you have to tell your applications to do. They have to run silently and they can't restart. So if you're looking for the syntax for an application, go to the IT Ninja and you will find syntax for thousands of applications documented there. Is that the kind of settings you're talking about?
Yeah, especially once it gets installed, I think what would be in the INI file.
Say that again?
Once an application is installed, those settings are usually in the INI file.
Oh, you might have to specify the INI file on this install quiet command. You might, if there's an INI file that you want to point it to customize it, you might have to point it to that in the syntax. I'll tell you, the way I do applications is I will go to a workstation machine and I'll map a drive over to my MDT server, open up a command prompt, and I will get the command to run exactly the way I need it to run, to be silent and not cause a reboot. Then, whatever the command line is that I just got to work properly, that's what I plug in here. If you can get it to run manually properly, then this just automates exactly what you got to work. To get it to run in your task sequence then, it could not be easier. Let's say instead of just the placeholder for install applications, I could come over here and say install a single app. Browse to my applications. Let's do trace32. Now what I don't like, notice it doesn't change the name. it still says install applications. So if I had 75 applications here, do you really want to see install applications 75 times? And you have to click on it to go look. So I just grab this guy, copy him, paste it in, and now I can see I'm installing Trace 32 there. So really that's the power, I think, of MDT, is just how easy it is to come in and get everything configured. If you want to create a new task sequence, you can copy and paste from one task sequence to another. If I wanted to, I could copy that whole state restore section. I could copy as much or as little as I wanted into another task sequence.
Can you configure the symbols for the Windows Performance Toolkit?
I've never tried to configure the symbols, but I don't know why you wouldn't be able to. It's just like installing other applications. If you need to restart, you just make sure that you tell MDT to restart. And this is not just for operating system deployments. You can do post-OS installations too. So if you have a client machine that's currently up and running, it's running Windows 7, Windows 8, and you want to install an application, from that machine you would map a drive to the deployment share. And I just kept mine named, pretty sure it's just deployment share here. Yep, this is it. It's just a shared folder that I let it name it deployment share. I would map a drive to this guy, go into the scripts folder, and run light touch VBS. That kicks off the deployment wizard. And then I can choose whatever task sequence I want. And whatever I tell the task sequence to do is what's going to happen. So if you just want to install symbols, you don't want to install a whole operating system, piece of cake. There's also some neat things you can do to tell it to suspend the deployment. Maybe there are manual steps that you have to go do. There are some applications like Riverbed, I found, that rewrite the TCP/IP stack. And that's bad in the middle of a deployment. Doesn't work very well. I have a client that I'm booting, the MDT WinPE, and that's what this guy looks like here. The new version takes a really long time to load up, so we might come back to this. Oh, good, it didn't that time. Sure if that's right or not. Let's see. And I'm not going to go through the whole wizard. It's hard to do with one hand. But it does have just some questions that it asks, and then a task sequence. It gives you a page of all your task sequences, and you can choose that. There's about 8 to 10 wizard pages. You can automate every single one of those if you choose to. In fact, you can go through and automate it based upon the model and make of the machine that's running. So you could just boot this machine up into the MDT WinPE. It automatically connects to the MDT's deployment share. And then based on that machine, it starts loading up whatever task sequence you've configured in the custom settings INI. So it's really very, very easy to automate MDT. Everything's documented pretty well for us on that one. But what I was going to mention, the reason I went in there, was Orchestrator. See, there's a whole lot more that we can add. I could tell it to run an Orchestrator runbook and tell it where the Orchestrator server is. And then under runbook, I get to browse all of the runbooks that have been created. So I could be creating Exchange mailboxes right in the middle of my deployment. I could be moving mailboxes, moving computer objects throughout Active Directory. Anything you want to do. You can do the same with Configuration Manager. So being able to put a runbook right in the middle of your deployment, the sky is the limit for what you can do now. There's no reason to have a piece of paper at the end of your deployment that you manually go through and make sure you did everything properly, or manual steps at the end of your deployment. No reason for that anymore. And I see that in most places that I go. When I leave, they don't have that paper anymore. That's the whole point, is I want to come in, I want to show you how to get rid of the paperwork. You don't need the paperwork. Just let everything be automated. Integration packs. I think there's about 20 or 22 integration packs, each one for different products. You get some from Microsoft site. You get some from Codeplex. There's a Calvirian, not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but you can go to their site. Some of theirs they charge for. Some of them are free. And what's really nice with runbooks is you can download a whole slew of runbooks that do things already. All you need to do is go in and change one or two little pieces of information in there to make it work in your environment. And you use the same runbook over and over and over again. You don't reinvent the wheel every time you want to do something. These are just a list of the Microsoft integration packs: SharePoint, Windows Azure, IBM Tivoli, HP Service Manager. And each one of these has about 70 to 150 different settings to that product. Won't be able to demo that for you. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the user-driven interface. And this cracks me up, because Microsoft just knew that all of you guys were going to let your users do their own operating system deployments. I thought they were kidding when they told us that. We're at the MVP Summit a few years ago. They're like, oh yeah, we're going to set it up so all your users can do their own deployments. And I started laughing. And they're like, what? Why is she laughing? I'm like, that has to be a joke. You're kidding, right? I mean, I'm used to the military. I've done a lot of work for the military. I go into a lot of federal agencies. And I'm telling you, Susie the secretary cannot choose her operating system to deploy. Oh my gosh, can you imagine what a nightmare it would be if your users were choosing the operating system they're going to deploy? Oh, I wonder what that task sequence does. I mean, it would just be a nightmare. You'd be running around fixing things all day long based on what somebody did to help somebody else down the hallway. So that's where they started with this, because they thought everybody was going to do the same thing that Microsoft did. And in Microsoft, yes, those people did their own deployments. But they all have degrees in computer science, every single one of them. And they don't really care what's in somebody else's image. They're just trying to get their job done. So they're not sitting there playing around, loading up different task sequences all day. So that's where this started. But what's nice for you, the administrator now, is you can design your entire deployment wizard. In fact, if you want to set it up so that there's 15 map drives available for home drives, and you want the technician to be able to just choose one instead of having to manually type something in, that's something you can do in UDI. You can create a wizard page, and it takes 2 seconds. The pages are already there. You just enable it, and then type in your UNC pass. You're done. Then during deployment, you get a nice little drop-down box, and your technician can choose which home folder you want to put everything in. So UDI is fantastic for administrators and technicians, but I don't think that we're there yet to let our end users go in and do their own deployment wizards. And with the newest version, you can actually create your own pages. So in the past, we could just use the pages that Microsoft gave us and customize those. Now you can create your own from scratch. Really nice. You can change the logos on them, the colors, make it just your own deployment wizard. All right. I don't want to keep you here too late. But what we covered was a lot with MDT. If you hadn't seen it before now, at least you've seen MDT. We talked about the tools that make MDT tick, so you know if you're going to move forward and deploy Windows 8, don't play with Windows AIK. Waste of time. Go straight to ADK and start using the latest and greatest, and that'll be the ADK for Windows 8.1. Don't get 8.0 or you're getting an older version of the tools. Remote control and monitoring, Dart gives us that. Group policy packs, you guys now know group policy packs are being deployed with your images, so if you don't want that to happen, you can stop it or customize and make your own. Talked about the new disk and partition types that are supported, how to create your own deployment wizard, and the last was Orchestrator. So I wish I could have demoed that for you guys. It's such a fantastic product, and I promise next time I come, or if I do get a chance to do a little 15, 20-minute Camtasia on it, I'll make sure I send that to Dave so he can make it available to you guys for free. Because it's a fantastic tool, and I'd love for you to at least take a look at it. So I might do that over the next couple weeks just to get it out there. But guys, thanks a lot for listening to me. I always enjoy coming here. Thanks.